If we want to be a great city, we have to have great arts and culture.
You have to have a range, just like a range of housing, a range from the highest of high culture to what it is people love.
Great restaurants, nightclub scenes, jazz clubs, recreational assets, parks.
We have it in our architecture, in our performing arts, in our visual arts, the sculpture, the murals, the historic homes.
We have such a musical tradition of classical as well as jazz.
We have more arts and cultural educational institutions in any city but New York.
It's the reason people clustered in cities in the first place, for the things that you can't get anywhere else.
In many ways, Philadelphia has always been at the center of the nation's art world. The Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts was the country's first museum and art school. For the 1876 Centennial Exhibition in Fairmount Park, city leaders built an art museum to showcase the emerging American style.
And it was the first time that American artists had seen their work shown next to artists from other countries.
At 9,200 acres, Fairmount Park is one of the biggest urban parks in the nation. Philadelphia's attempt to make urban living more civilized and protect the city's watershed.
They declared the whole area up the Schuylkill and going up the Wissahickon as a place you couldn't build in. So whatever factories were there were removed, and you have this great park and this great asset.
But access to this great asset was partially blocked by the Chinese Wall and the train tracks. As early as 1884, there were drawings for a broad diagonal boulevard that would connect the city to its park.
This Grand Parkway was conceived as a boulevard to be lined by civic buildings.
Inspired by the Champs-Élysées in Paris, the original plans called for dense development of fine homes, exclusive shops, and public institutions. The city began acquiring property in 1906, and demolition began the following year.
The area where the Parkway is had gone into a state of decline, old textile mills and row houses, and they were raised to make room for this very ceremonial street.
With the impressive new French Second Empire City Hall on one end, city leaders wanted to anchor the boulevard with an equally majestic building at the other end. There had been calls for a new art museum since 1894.
When the city fathers came to finding a new home for the Philadelphia Museum of Art, which was located way out in the park, it was decided that it should be the institution at the head of the Parkway.
In 1928, the Philadelphia Museum of Art opened to the public. But then the Depression hit. Development not already in the pipeline came to a halt.
There's a report that the City Planning Commission did in 1935, at which point nearly every major cultural institution on the Parkway is done that we know today. And the report says only half of the Parkway is finished.
By the end of World War II, it was the age of the automobile. The edges of Logan Circle were rounded to be more car-friendly, and Aikens Oval was converted to a traffic circle.
That emphasis on the automobile prevents this whole section of Philadelphia of having the kind of flavor that it ought to have.
In 1999, the Central Philadelphia Development Corporation, or CPDC, released a new plan to bring more life to the Parkway.
It didn't fly very well.
The level of development that they were calling for to sustain some of the retail and other possibilities was way too much development.
We then went back again, sort of having licked our wounds and sort of learned the mistakes we made the first time, and did a second process much more in partnership with the cultural institutions.
Our dream is to have a whole network of sidewalk cafes and shops and bookstalls, and the side streets would have many more shops and things than they do already.
The Parkway, I think, is an enormous opportunity for the city.
As early as the 1940s, ideas were brewing to create a similar cultural district on South Broad Street.
That was a gleam in the eye of the dean of the School of Architecture at Penn, Dean Holmes Perkins, who was also head of the Planning Commission. And he would have students at Penn do studios where they thought of how you would make this happen.
South Broad Street had been the hub of business and finance, but when Penn Center went up, many offices migrated to West Market. By the 1970s, many of South Broad Street's historic buildings were obsolete and empty.
People were saying, we're doing all this work in Market Street, we're doing all this work in Independence Mall, Broad Street, our main corridor, is beginning to run down.
CPDC, known then as Old Philadelphia Development Corporation, had formed a South Broad Street Committee in the 1960s, and by the late 1970s began staging Avenue of the Arts festivals.
We simply wound up closing off the street, putting music out on the street, and it helped to create an image of the area as an arts district.
In the 1980s, Mayor Wilson Goode created the Greater Philadelphia Film Office and the Mural Arts Program, with the hope that emphasizing the arts would boost the struggling city.
And arts and culture create a fabric in a city where people decide if they're going to live there. It helps bring business into this city.
OPDC also began studying the need for a new orchestra hall and other performance venues.
We surveyed the big halls in Philadelphia, the needs of the orchestra, the ballet, and the opera company, and the answer is yes, indeed, we need a new hall.
The orchestra decided to build the hall at Broad and Spruce, and in 1990, CPDC released a plan that called for extending the Avenue of the Arts down to Washington Avenue.
During the mayoral campaign, Ed Rendell came to one of these forums that was on the Avenue of the Arts and basically said, I want to do this.
Once mayor, he did, drumming up financial support from the private sector, convincing Harrisburg to ante up $65 million and recruiting his wife to help.
I was reluctant because we haven't always been involved in the arts, but I really thought that it combined the arts as well as economic development.
What Ed Rendell did is take an idea that was on paper and breathe funding and energy into it.
Drive down East River Drive a couple times. His car would pull up and the window would go down and go, Greg, Greg! He said, I got your memo here. No, yes, and yes. And we know yes and yes would be the three questions that I asked him in terms of, guidance on. But that was incredible to think that the mayor of the city was looking at the stuff and driving it.
We accomplished a lot. We built 10 projects up and down the avenue, both north and south, and I think we provided a critical mass of venues that then inspired others to come and do retail.
The project was boosted by private investors like legendary songwriter Kenny Gamble, who in 1990 began a block-by-block transformation of the south of South Street neighborhood where he grew up.
I think this is the best investment that you can make is in the future.
Avenue of the Arts, Inc. is now working to expand the district north, all the way to Lehigh Avenue.
Temple University has got all these great assets. The Uptown Theater is there. Freedom Theater is up on North Broad Street.
We also have a few smaller institutions, the Asian Arts Initiative, the Fabric Workshop. They're also on Cherry Street. One of our challenges is facing the fact that we're not finished. It's not complete.
It once was a great place as a residential address, and I see it becoming a wonderful residential address in the future.
I think it is going to be important to link the southern part of it and the northern part of it.
You can't walk through City Hall at night anymore. So the courtyard as this great civic space is really not available. You have to walk through Dilworth Plaza. Dilworth Plaza isn't good enough yet.
I'd like to see the Parkway animated a little more, like the Champs-Elysees.
We ought to find ways to make it a place where people can walk and talk and have conversation and do art and go to libraries.
I'd love to see more opportunities for pedestrians to travel up and down the Parkway and have places to stop along the way, to sit and rest, to get something to eat. There has to be a mix of cultural, residential, restaurant activities, I think, to make it truly come alive.
When the Barnes comes, in 2.5 square miles of Center City, we're going to have more incredible arts and culture treasures than any city in the world.
It'll have a fabulous life. It'll be very different from the Avenue of the Arts, and it'll take its cue from the institutions that are already on it.
I think that we're going to be, in the next 15 years, a very exciting place to visit and see.
It clearly will be an arts district that puts Philadelphia on a world map.